Fran Frye works at the intersection of sexuality, trauma, and compassion. She's a certified sex educator, a counsellor and clinician, trained in compulsive sexual behaviours, and a somatic sex practitioner based in Charleston, South Carolina. She holds certification from the Sexual Health Alliance, the American Board of Sexology, and the Somatic Institute, and she brings to this work not only rigorous training, but her own lived experience as a sexual assault survivor, a former military spouse, and a hospice volunteer. Gosh, there's a lot there. Thank you so much for joining. It's very kind of you. I've already enjoyed our sort of pre-conversation, if you like. So I'm just thrilled to, hopefully get to know a little bit about you and your lived experience, and hopefully share your story with people that want to listen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
And if it's okay, I'd like to sort of start by just taking people back a little bit. So maybe if you could describe who you were during your formative sort of teenage years. Were you always very comfortable in your own body? Were you always very confident? What sort of person were you in your sort of teenage years growing up?
Sure. I think I really relied on my brain to make meaning making through people. I think that has been very important to me. I have to understand myself and the world through my relationship with others. So I did that through connection and really listening to people. I think marginalized folks, the underdog, the nerds, quote unquote, in the classroom, I would like to take under my wing and support. And that has always felt very aligned with me. Not that I'm the kindest soul or the best soul, but I certainly connected my purpose through that. And as I grew up, it changed and molded and formulated in different ways through survivorship and volunteer and philanthropy. But I think at the heart of it, it started with I never had felt heard in my childhood, or that was sort of my wound. And so to sort of close that loop of trauma, I had always reached out to others trying to ensure that they were heard.
And when do you think you first felt heard as a person?
Gosh, these are such kind questions. I really think that when I had gone to counseling and therapy for my divorce, when I got divorced 6 or 7 years ago, I was going there, I think, because of my rape, from being raped. I think there was a lot of wounding there that wasn't catered to. And so when traditional therapy wasn't hearing my sexual needs, wasn't hearing me in that way, I really thought to seek out a way for myself to heal. And I think at the Somatica Institute, when I was sharing my shame and it wasn't judged, it was received in a way that was safe and not pathologized, I think is when I was really seen and heard. And it felt really aligned that I was getting into this work for that very reason. It was like, okay, you're going to close this loop that you've been desperately trying to close.
And if you're uncomfortable, please say so. But in terms of your assault, was that somebody that was known to you, or was that somebody, that just assaulted you at random?
Yes, and thanks for asking. That's not a common question, too. He was an acquaintance, a friend, I guess. And what I think made it a little bit different in this way was my best friend, who cisgendered female, sort of facilitated in the rape. So he was differently abled and she facilitated in the rape. So there were several dynamics there that I felt were different. And she herself, too, was a rape survivor. So a lot of my healing was really in both camps, if you just want to say it heteronormatively. My healing was needing to heal friendships and relationships. So it's kind of a little more than you asked, but that was the dynamic there.
I'm so sorry you experienced that.
Thank you.
And how was your ability to trust, to engage with other people, to enter into relationships? How was that affected by the situation?
I started out by probably marrying the wrong guy. And
A lot of people do.
yep, and I'm okay with that. I've worked through that, and the only way I thought that in order for me to gain trust in others was to seek it out through volunteering. I
Hmm.
realized that the hurt were hurting, and there was just a lot of people, marginalized individuals, that could sort of share in that with me. And I've always heard that in order to love yourself, you have to love others. And I think it's in order to love others, or excuse me, am I flipping that around? Yeah,
Mm.
you have
That's
you
okay.
have to love yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I learned that the love that I was giving through volunteering was really what I needed, and I get that back through my volunteering. So it sort of healed that, but I think intuitively, somatically, I knew that in order to make sense of what happened to me, make light of what happened to me, and understand truly that the hurt, that I had to seek out why everyone is up to what they're up to, which is why I think, I started in food scarcity. I
Mm.
have done domestic violence, suicide prevention, shelters. I've answered a rape crisis hotline for 3 years. I was a rape victims advocate for 3 years. And I thought that was the only way to learn about people, was to see folks at their best and their worst. I did human trafficking at the Tampa International Airport for a year to just understand survivorship and those needs. So a lot of this work is so selfishly um, um, part of me, because I have this innate need to heal me. And then it's also, I have seen and learned so much by being at the hands of misbehaving men starting out in preschool, that it would be a disservice not to share with folks my keen ability to recognize patterns. And I saw those patterns in my philanthropy and my volunteering, and feel it's my role to share it with others. That's healed that for me, for sure.
Wow. I think there's one word you said that I would vehemently disagree with. I think you said you do this selfishly. I think you do this very selflessly. I think I can't. I don't think I've spoken to anybody that has decided that the way to heal and reflect and recognize the challenges and trauma they're facing is to dive into other people's challenges, trauma, etc. And I think it's yeah, I think you must be a very special person to be able to do that. A lot of people would want to run 1,000 miles away from that situation, whereas you've literally run towards the fire,
Right.
and I think that's huge, yeah, huge kudos to you for doing that, and through all the and this is almost an impossible question to answer, so forgive me almost for asking it, but through all of the experiences you've had with people that perhaps have made bad life choices, have made situations for other people worse, have made life for people difficult. Are there any common themes? Do people tend to act in a way that they've been treated? Are there any reasons for why somebody might assault somebody, why somebody might become a human trafficker, why somebody might become I don't know, a drug dealer or whatever? Are there any common themes that you've noticed?
Yes, I think self-regulation
Hmm.
is a skill set that perhaps we're not privy to in our cultures. And I think that I noticed along the lines, I know that I noticed that self regulation is the sexiest skill, in particular, a penis owner can develop in these situations. And I noticed that dysregulation was a common thread. And I believe in, or I study the existential importance of the penis. So I believe that because growing up, men are socially taught that their sexuality is accepted, but emotions aren't, that their nervous system sort of uses their penis as a conduit for male emotion. And because of that, and our nervous system is so interrelated, what I'm seeing and what I was seeing is that men were mistaking fear or stress or loneliness for arousal. And so they were using perhaps alcohol and rape situations to fulfill this deep loneliness, the hurt. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If someone has hurt you, they are hurting more than you, I guarantee it. And so I know in rape situations that was often the theme. In food scarcity, I certainly saw dysregulation. Those were definitely my boys. This is how it all started. This is how I related. Table 11 is a story I often think about, and they were older, dark-skinned gentlemen who had been on the streets of Tampa for years. And dysregulation was something that I just couldn't ignore. And they were all buff, and I am buff myself. I'm a lifter. And I related to them because I thought, you are punching and lifting and doing all the things in the gym because you need support regulating. And so I certainly saw dysregulation as a theme throughout. Domestic violence, dysregulation, rape crisis hotline, dysregulation, suicide prevention, dysregulation, for sure.
It's something we talked a little bit before we hit record about the education system and things, and it's certainly not something that I'm aware that, certainly in the UK and I'm sure in the US, that is taught or discussed how to regulate emotions, feelings, sensations, whatever, and how your regulation of your emotions, feelings, sensations impacts other people is not something that I'm aware that my teenagers have been taught about. It's certainly something that I wasn't taught about way back in the day, but it feels it feels of fundamental importance, doesn't it? If we can, or at least recognize when we are not regulating, or how our regulation, how it impacts people within our circle and within our extended circle. It feels so important.
100%. And they're not supporting us in any capacity. There's fluoride in our water, which calcifies our pineal gland, which helps us with our intuition. The food they feed us is not supporting our brain health. The alcohol that they're encouraging us to drink certainly doesn't help you make good decisions. Like, they're not supporting us in any capacity to be better regulated.
Well, I think that, and maybe this is too political, but I think the reason for that is that governments and society in general want us to be malleable and numb. They don't want us to notice what they're doing that we might be vexed about or complain. They don't want people to necessarily have ultimate control of themselves and their decisions in the process. They want a fairly malleable and amenable electorate or society. Slightly off topic, but that just feels why they try and dumb things down for us, because they don't want an informed electorate.
Definitely. And thanks to podcasts like you, folks like me talking about this, I think making the conversation normalized is beautiful and kind of fights back. I don't like to use fighting terms, but it gets back at that.
I think one of the things I noticed on your website, which I said before, and highly recommend people go and find, because it's a very generous website. It's a very giving website. It's very informative. But I think one of the things you reject is a notion of addiction. So whether it be porn addiction, sex addiction, almost in the sense of, because if somebody is labelled as being an addict, therefore they've got to go through recovery, they've got to pull away from, they've got to fundamentally change who they are. And I wonder what you think labeling somebody as an addict actually does to a person who fundamentally is struggling anyway.
Right, right. Well, when I hear addiction, I
Mm-hmm.
think abstinence.
Yes.
And I don't want someone's bodily system that is meant to bring pleasure to a person to not ever be connected with because they have a regulation issue or an attachment issue or a trauma issue. That is asinine to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
believe that our addiction models are abstinence related, they are substance related. And so to add the term addiction is very pathologizing, moralizing. It's based on faith, it's based on culture, it's based on all these things. When the person simply is trying, and I keep saying regulated, but the person is simply trying to be regulated and not pathologized. So I think with addiction, oftentimes in those circles and groups, I have been taught through quantum physics, which I love, that the two words I am are the strongest words that you can say. And I say to my clients, if you say I'm an idiot, what do you think you're going to be? You're going to be an idiot.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if you every week go in saying I am an addict, what do you think you're going to be? There's absolutely no new story, no new lie. Tell yourself a better lie. There would be no room for that under the addiction model. So I feel very passionate about that. I don't think that framework gives you much to move through.
Mm.
How does that?
It's interesting. No, it's interesting when you go to the sort of 12-step program and whatever the different variations there are of it. Is that a lot of things they talk about are, I wouldn't say shame, but it's almost that sort of, right, you've got to admit that you're a failure because you drink too much, you have too much sex, you indulge in too much narcotics, or whatever. Therefore, right, unless you admit that, then we can't fix you. And I think that's one of the things that really gets me is when people sadly feel they need to be fixed, because none of us are broken. There are things that we want to change about ourselves. And I think you said it far more eloquent than I have, but I think a lot of the actions that people take are their way of responding to the pain that they're feeling. If that makes sense, you put it far better than I did. But I think that's a challenge. So if you are feeling that pain, you are responding to the pain that you are encumbered by, how do you how do we help people perhaps find a different way to recognize, reflect, honor that pain, but also to move forward? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that kind of ties into understanding our nervous system
Yep.
and allowing for space for that discharge. Because I
Hmm.
think that in order to gain sort of, I don't know if the control is the best word, but in order to gain sort of an understanding over your sexuality, I think you need to understand how it behaves when it's at a discharge, a needy moment, and how it behaves in love. So, what lust and love are looking like. So, I think nervous system understanding is really important. And I've added, and I think I really need to understand where I learned this, but I added a fifth F. It's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and FUCK is the fifth F. And our nervous system is meant to manage high arousal states. And I
Hmm.
think that it would be a disservice. It would be a huge disservice to ignore sex as a way for our nervous system to discharge. Because, I mean, just think when men were at the guillotines, I talk about this, they had erections. And
Yeah.
our nervous system pathways are so intricately, closely related that it would be a disservice not to recognize that this erection could be fear. It could be
Yeah.
loneliness. It could be stress after work. So if you're going to masturbate one out to get this discharge out, that's great. But know the difference between this is just, oh my gosh, I got to do it. I have no control. It's happening to me. Life is never happening to you, it's happening for you and through you. So if you understand and you're able to pendulate and say, take that pause, is my body reacting from a place of lust or a place of love? And it doesn't have to be this deep love. It can be with a stranger, as long as it feels
Yeah.
connected and you feel present.
Mm.
But I think that is something, as far as getting people in that place. Your question, I think, was had a few layers to it. I think it's really
Mm.
important to sort of understand how the nervous system reacts as well. So it's
Hmm.
um, when you're walking on a path, right? You up ahead, you see something in the path, and you see, oh no, is that a snake? Because your nervous system is always trying to keep you alive. God forbid there was a mistake there. So you look at it and you're like, "Oh no, my brain's coming back to me. It's a stick. Everything's okay."
Yeah.
So if you're and I believe that heterosexual cisgendered men specifically, that's who I can speak on because I work with that. I believe they're conditioned not to recognize that immediate sensation in our body, that it's like that prickly, tingly sensation. Oh shit, there's a snake. We're taught to ignore that. So all of a sudden we're thinking with our prefrontal cortex that has all these, silly stories, but our nervous system is handling it from 35 years ago. It's never going to align right. So I think it's really understanding if somebody said something to you and you react kind of weirdly in your body, you say, why am I reacting this way? What is this about? Am I really this angry? Is this an old wound? I say if
Mm.
it's hysterical, it's historical. So if you're reacting hysterically, I'm guessing it's old news. But you have to understand how your body's reacting before this naughty brain of yours that isn't telling the truth half the time gets in the way.
Mm. And I think a lot of that is that when we're younger and we're going through puberty, and we first start to experience desires to masturbate and touch ourselves, whatever, then generally it's if a little boy has his hands down his trousers, some of them will say, "Oh, just take your hands out of there, it's dirty." And I think we very quickly learn to masturbate very quickly to get it over with before somebody comes in the room or bursts in the bathroom or whatever. And I don't think, and I've talked to people, and I'd say around half of people have never spent an hour or 2 hours just touching their own body and exploring what gives them their own pleasure. So I think not having a self pleasure practice, it's kind of, you think, well, okay, how do you expect other people to give you pleasure, or how do you expect to be able to communicate what you want and what you desire? Because we've had this thing of, hey, we shouldn't touch ourselves, that's dirty, that's naughty, that's something to be sort of frowned upon. It's very odd that we don't have that intimate knowledge of ourselves. I think the more we understand ourselves physically, then hopefully we start to love ourselves, and the more we can understand each other and ourselves emotionally, which I think hopefully makes us somebody that does have the ability to regulate themselves better.
Absolutely. And why wouldn't pleasure, like you're talking about masturbation, I think you specifically talked about puberty, but I believe that masturbation has been cited in the womb.
Hmm.
Self-pleasure in children is very common.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is our first way of self-regulating. That is our body's way of self-regulating as small people. And so
Mm.
when you're immediately taught that that's dirty and bad, I mean, my God, what else do you have at that
Yeah.
point, for
Yeah.
self-regulation? So yeah, makes me sad.
Mm. Mm. I do think we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. There's a gap between often there's a gap between sex and intimacy, and we talked before about perhaps if the word pleasure was introduced more into our vocabulary rather than performative sex being the goal of every dynamic. Do you think there is something in that our aim or aspiration should be to evoke, experience pleasure rather than having this sort of goal or target of what sex looks and feels like?
Absolutely, and I think at Somatica, they first asked us, ask us, what is sex? And I thought, I'm not even sure. So maybe
Yeah.
your listeners can do some journaling and ask themselves, what is sex to them? Because, like you're saying, we're taught that very staircase model of sex where foreplay is the start and it ends in orgasm,
Mm.
and it's penetrative based. That's basically penile vaginal sex. That's sex.
Yeah.
Penetration, that's sex. And so with the new way of thinking, a wheel model is you sort of have all these ways of pleasure to choose from, and you can have an orgasm at the quote unquote end of it or not. And I would argue that sex is the erotic thread that ends from the minute you get dressed or whatever is happening, however the aftercare. That erotic thread takes you all the way to the next time that you're experiencing intimacy and pleasure. So yes, if you expanded the word sex to pleasure rather than using first base, second base, third, like we're using sports terms, it's
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
unreasonable. Yeah, I love that you mentioned pleasure as another way of talking about sex. I love that.
Hmm. One of the things in the somatic approach is that concept, compulsive behavior rather doesn't start as a thought, but it's more a state in the body. It's more a sensation, I guess. So what does somatic work look to do? How does somatic work help somebody understand themselves in a more, what's the right word? Yeah, in a more holistic way.
Sure. I think in Somatica, I learned specifically about cisgendered heterosexual men was they were not seeing their abilities to be present and to
Mhm.
experience their pleasure and to ask for what it is they want. And that really stuck out to me, encouraging clients that come through the Somatica route to put on their oxygen mask before putting on the masks of others. Because if you're unaware of your pleasure, of your wants and needs in a bedroom situation, then I think that would be a very hard way of being present in sex if you are taught to perform rather than connect. And through the body, which is how pleasure and sex is being experienced, I thought there is no way that I can understand sex in full without spending a year and a half in Somatica understanding the body. The body
Mhm.
keeps the score. I am so
Yeah.
body based. I feel everything hyper intuitively through my body, and I have spent years suppressing it and not listening to it. And I know the costs. I think Gabor Mate is saying that if you're not a bitch, you're going to have an autoimmune disease. And I would kind of argue, maybe not the bitch part. There's ways of having boundaries, being kind, and articulating your needs and wants. But it's so darn true that if you are not listening to your body, if you are not working through your body, you will end up sick. And you can't tell me that men's suicide at 85, the largest population, that men's mental health is on the decline, that men are struggling. You can't tell me that their bodies aren't keeping the score. Prostate cancer, like you just can't tell me that. And so I thought Somatica, I know that Somatica, understanding the body, somatics of the body, is one of the best ways to understand how men are not able to connect in sex in that way.
Mm. I want wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I've been to therapy for different things, and I always struggle because I always thought I was being addressed literally from the neck upwards. And I always carry my feeling and sensations in my gut. I can sort of describe almost the color and the feeling and the shape of my sensations I feel. But it's almost like, okay, we'll look at the brain, but we'll ignore the this big thing that carries a brain around, which always seemed very odd. So I always wanted to, but how do I release things? How do I let the feelings go, or how do I at least almost inwardly explore the feelings beyond what's in my head, really? And I think there's still a big gap between different models of therapy and recognition that actually the body is so important. The body in and of itself carries our emotions, our feelings, our pain, our love, our desire, all those things. At least as much as the brain, but it still doesn't seem to get the credit that it deserves, really. More and more people hopefully are coming to the right books and finding the right teachers and speaking to people like you and recognize it. And once you do get a chance to release, to explore, to expose, I think it's extraordinarily cleansing, empowering, uplifting, enlightening, etc. And I think, as I was going to ask you, do you find that you obviously live in incredible shape? Do you find that lifting and really feeling each and every one of your muscles helps you understand and feel your body much better than it used to?
Absolutely. And I had after I was raped, I had stopped working out. When my mom said, the doctor said I was born with calves when I was a little person. So for me not to work out for 13 years until I had some clarity really said a lot to me. It was, I feel safe in my body. I didn't want to be in my body. My body, as far as I was concerned, failed me in that situation. And at the time, I have since worked through that. But I didn't appreciate how much the body knew and knows. Yeah.
When you work with men and they've been through the different stages of their growth and their progression, one of the things I've always found hard, or when I talk to people find hard, is how you create this safe space for the conversation you want to have with your partner. A lot of us enter relationships when we're relatively young and might be in a relationship for, and it's not necessarily a time thing. It could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, for goodness sake. And things that we did when we first got together, we might not really like anymore, or things that we've perhaps been thinking about, we want to try for the last 2, 3, 5, 10 years, but never dared raise because we have a fear that either our partner will say, oh, you're weirdo, or
Yeah.
you pervert, or they run away screaming, or I don't know. How do you help, I guess, men in particular, frame that conversation?
I do believe that communication is lubrication, and they have to rip the Band-Aid off. That has to
Mhm.
happen. It's got to be at a kitchen table on a Sunday morning, outside of the bedroom, timing, tone, and turf, as Dr. Sex with Emily often talks about when you talk about sex. And you have to come together and understand that your goal is to not yuck somebody's yum in this. And you are going in at the conversation curious. I think that's why I use books as a way to
Mm.
sort of talk about it, because it is absorbable, and the people that read it are that write these sex books that I share seem to be so kind and understanding and generous with their information. So I really try to give men all that. I have hundreds of documents of all of my knowledge in my head that says, here are the ways that you can better communicate sex with your partner. I want to give everything I know to you. And then I say we teach people how to treat us. And I believe that we teach people how to FUCKS. And so I'm not going to be there in the bedroom with you when you are in an intimate moment with your partner, and you need to have the skills and tools to do it. I think the book Desire, is a really great book. I think listening to intimacy podcasts like yours is a really great start for folks to communicate sex. And also, if someone is not willing to listen to your sexuality and what it is that you're about and understand you, there are, I believe that there are conversations that need to be have about how important sex and sexuality is to you in your relationship, and what agreements you do have. I
Mm.
think I'm under the understanding that if you are not getting your needs met, the men that I work with, and your partner is not open to meeting your needs, you're banging your head against the wall, because the person who wants less sex will always win in the
Yes.
relationship. So if you are consistently wanting more and more sex, I love that for that person. If their partner is not as in love with that for that person, they're not going to get there. So you can only communicate so much. And so there
Mm.
is a part where it's, is this relationship for me? And there are plenty of people out there that will meet your sexual needs, and it's not something to pathologize, because you want more,
Mm.
different.
It's very interesting you say that, and then a couple of example people I talked to. So I talked to a number of women operators, dominatrix,
Cool.
all of whom absolutely wonderful, absolutely delightful people. And one of the things they say is that it, they say the dynamic isn't typically what people might expect. It's not always purely sexual. It's not always, but it's just something that men in particular feel that all their wives have sort of said, no, I could never do that. It's not something, and it's just something they take to a professional. Like we take lots of other things to other professionals. That it's almost, they say that almost a lot of the clients come to them for a form of therapy in a way, that they're experiencing something with this professional dominatrix, who's typically, you get somebody who's very skilled. It's a very empowering experience to be submissive. Whereas a lot of men feel uncomfortable exploring that submissive side of themselves with their partner, but actually taking it outside of the relationship and engaging with it with somebody else strengthens the rest of the relationship. And I'm not sort of advocating that people go behind people's backs or cheat or whatever the right words are, but I do think there are, as you say, there are other avenues to explore. And I do also think, and this frustrates me a lot, having talked to lots of wonderful people, that whenever many people hear about BDSM or the kink community or whatever, it's often with a very negative connotation. And I would say that the people I talk to in those communities are the people that communicate. You say communicate to lubricate, communicate far more than anything, as they talk about yes, no, maybe, consent. Do you want to try this? Try this. There's so much discussion goes on, and it's almost, that's part of the erotic act, is the conversations that they have. Whereas
Right.
in a sort of, I guess, a more vanilla relationship, consent is often assumed, or because somebody did something once, then therefore they want to do it again, and we don't have that yes, no, maybe, safe word, whatever, all this sort of thing. And I do think people should give BDSM, kink, if those words aren't viewed negatively, much more openness in the way that they think about it. And do you find the same, that people that really explore their sexuality are a lot more communicative and open and reflective upon who they are?
Yes, and myself included. My gosh, I just think of how much I really almost I was required to learn and understand BDSM in my healing, to be able to say the yeses and nos and maybes in
Mhm.
my personal sex life. Absolutely. It's been imperative to me. And, bodies are not inherently sexual. And I don't understand why BDSM is inherently dangerous. It's almost like the really great things that they offer to us, the world just kind of makes bad so that we don't know better to do better. But BDSM is about power, and often the submissive has the most power, which is why it's so beautiful. And in those non-consensual sex moments, I use BDSM in my own sex life to reenact the rape in a safe way, because I am giving the partner that I know power to do what it is that I am telling him to do. And I gain power from that experience. And so for someone to yuck my yum or to judge that, I know it's not personal. So it has been life changing for me to understand BDSM, and I'm very kinky and understand, I'm kink affirming, kink positive practice, and understand that we have so many sexual interests that may not make sense to us, but to get in an environment with somebody who hears you and sees you in BDSM is beautiful. So, I understand how you're not advocating for folks to step out, but to be seen, to
Mhm.
really be seen deeply, even if it's by a stranger, a dominatrix, is one of the most beautiful things I think can happen for someone. So I certainly understand you're not advocating folks to step out. And at the same point, understanding someone's sexuality is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your partner.
Absolutely. And from the conversations that I've had, it changes people's lives.
Mhm.
It it really allows them to shine a light on part of themselves that has been in darkness for a long, long time. And I think, you put it very beautifully. And a lot of people think, "Gosh, but how can she want to reenact the rape?" And it's been the director of your own scene, of your own story, that you are literally giving this person the control at that particular moment, but it's on your terms, it's under your conditions, it's under your rules, which is conversely what people would think. It's incredibly empowering for you. And like I say, it allows you to replay and take the positive elements that you want to take. And it's not a it's not a submissive thing. It's not a weakness. It's such a strength, I think, really. And as you say, people that are being dominated, people that are submissive, they tend to be the ones that have the most strength, because they're the ones that are completely empowered. If you have a bad dominatrix, then it's not. But typically, most people that are in that space, that are trained, that are knowledgeable, that are experienced, all the ones I've talked to are absolutely, yeah, completely respectful of their art, if you like. So yeah, I totally agree.
Certainly. And why would I ever let someone else's inadequacies affect a lifetime of pleasure for myself? Like, I'm
Absolutely.
too competitive for that, and I already allowed for that for, the many years that I was healing. So the last thing I'm gonna do is let somebody get in the way of working through my sexuality. So, yeah,
Mm.
I would really encourage folks to explore BDSM, especially if they're competitive like me, 'cause
Yeah.
it certainly helped me gain my power back, and I feel,
Mm.
even looking back at, the rape situation, I feel empowered, knowing that I was, quote, unquote, "the submissive" in that situation, learning
Mhm.
about BDSM now. I see it far differently than I did, in that rape crisis room.
Mm. Do you think you spent too long in your marriage?
Yeah. Yes.
And is that because being very competitive, I guess you want whatever you do to be a success. And I think we have this view, particularly in Western culture, well, in most cultures, I guess, that if a marriage ends up in divorce, therefore that marriage has been a failure. We don't look at the micro wins or the major wins that marriage. The marriage might have had some incredibly positive. Yours might not, but some marriages have incredibly
Oh,
positives,
good job.
and they just happen to end. So, why do you think you sort of hung on for too long? Was it that you were convinced you could fix things or change things, or you were too scared to break away, or was it a military culture thing? What do you think the reason was you stayed around?
Yes, I believe that my ex-husband in the military culture kept me safe.
Yeah.
And safety 6 months after being raped felt really good. And it
Hmm.
took me a long time not to bash my ex-husband and say, "Oh, he did this, and he's a bad guy, and he's a jerk, and a narcissist," and all this stuff, to realize I kept him around to keep me safe. I did a pretty damn good job at keeping me safe and small and quiet, but I needed that time to grow, to realize,
Hmm.
to heal, to experience. And so I am, extremely grateful for the safety. and the safety that the military life provided me. And I think that's why every Wednesday I serve at the Fisher House, which is a Ronald McDonald house for veterans. So basically, they get free room and board when they are experiencing medical distress. And I I didn't realize the sacrifice that our men and women make in the service. And my ex-husband really showed me that. So I feel very grateful for the safety that that relationship provided. Yes, I stayed in it way too long. However, it was required to get here. Nothing was a second too long, because I don't think I would have realized the power that I have and the connection that I have with men. And I may not have joined the junior league out in Tucson if I wasn't as lonely as I was, because he was gone all the time. I
Yeah.
may never had met Elizabeth out there, who is the CEO of CODA. It's just a wonderful organization supporting kids. And so along the way, I learned and met the people to get me here. So I feel very grateful. I'm sorry I did stick around for that long. However, ever since, it's been really cool too.
And what have your relationships been like subsequent to that? A very different type of people, different expectations, different guardrails. How have your relationships evolved?
That's a funny question. When my parents listen to this, they will smile too, because that's been a challenge for sure. And I definitely have gotten this work because I relate to my clients. And I have pathologized myself in so many capacities for my sexual behaviors along this path. And I've not had a boyfriend in the 7 years I've been divorced. And I've really explored sexuality and explored my sexuality and my pleasures. And I've not lived in a traditional, way of relationships by any mean. Sometimes I think, oh, this is a trauma wound. Sometimes I think, I married my dad in a way, who is now Dad 2.0, and he rocks. So there are certainly many theories and questions I've asked myself in my dating, but there's not been a commitment. And I believe that I've needed to work through a lot of the wounds that I've had before.
Hmm. Can you see yourself being in a long-term monogamous relationship in the future?
It would have to be it would have to be my own. I don't know if that's the answer. It would have to be speechless. It would have to
Yeah.
be my own way of doing things. I don't know if we necessarily would need to live together. Maybe we could have houses next door, or we don't share a
Mhm.
bed, or um, different things like that. However, I would like a long-term partner and someone to grow with and experience life with. I think that would be really wonderful, but I
Yeah.
don't know what that would look like. And I am just starting to get here, which is why the pause was so long. So if any viewers were like, "Are we still there?" Our listeners, it was because it's taken me a hot minute, and it was still will. I mean, I could be at this decision point in another 10 years.
Yeah.
Relationships are not linear in that way.
No. Do you think, and I have a view on this that I'll share when you've given your view, but do you think we're naturally monogamous, or do you think we're more naturally polyamorous?
I believe we are more naturally polyamorous. And if I had not explored my sexuality in the way that I have for 7 years, I, it would be a disservice to me. And had I this is my personal opinion, had I lived out my marriage until death, ah,
Do us part.
damn, I would have missed out on so much of myself.
Yeah.
So, maybe of course it works for folks, and I love it for folks. It didn't land with me after my
Mm.
divorce. I'd love to hear your view.
Yeah, I have the same view, and it's and this sounds silly, but almost from a yes from an emotional perspective, but I think from a scientific perspective, you go back only 300 or 400 years, it was very unnatural for one person to have the same partner because the whole purpose of life then was procreation. So the whole phrase "takes a village to raise a child" was because within a village there was no certainty of who the father of the child was, because the whole purpose was to have the best performing sperm, to have the most possibility of having children was a whole thing. So polyamory or non-monogamy in that sort of circumstance was very, very natural. And if I look at it now, there are 8 billion people on the planet. We don't assume that we get all of the friendship we want from one person. We don't assume we get all the knowledge we want from one person. We don't assume we get all of anything from one person. So that sort of expectation we get all of our most intimate needs fulfilled by one person seems to be sort of statistically very, very naive, really. But then from an emotional perspective, yeah, people just evolve at different paces, and people look for different things, and people have different hopes, and people want to explore different expectations, whatever. And my biggest turn on is intellect and talking to somebody and having a conversation. That's why I do this. I meet some amazing people. I'm incredibly attracted to most people I talk to because they're passionate and knowledgeable and all those great things.
Cool.
Not saying your partner can't be, but you're never going to get two people that think and feel the same thing about everything. It just isn't. No, that's not desirable either. I think so. I do think. Yeah, I think at some point in the future we'll perhaps evolve back to the future, if that makes sense. I do think we'll start to recognize actually this, and I think that's why a lot of people are experimenting with relationships, connections, discussions with AI in quite intimate ways. And for me, I was talking to a professor of AI earlier today, actually, and her specialty is intimacy with AI, sex bots, all those sort of things. And she says, look, it's because they can create incredible fantasies, they can talk about incredible things, some of the sort of fan fiction you read now
Right.
about Twilight or Harry Potter or Friends or whatever. I always wonder if the actors ever read that stuff. Their minds would be blown, I think. But maybe they'd be excited. But it's just something in the same way with AI, you can have that incredibly intimate, incredibly say whatever you want conversation with it. And I think that's almost our substitution for having another partner in a way. And I think as that develops, we'll see more and more of that, yeah, consensual, intimate dynamic with more than one entity. It might be another person, might be an AI, might be whatever. So I do agree, as you said, if you spent the last if you'd gone straight from your marriage, carried on in the marriage, or gone to another marriage straight away, you'd just be a very, very different person today. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd just be a very different version of who you are. Almost, if you think of your light turned up to 100 watts, it's almost like your light would be dimmed to sort of 30 watts, and
100%.
that'd be sad for everybody, I think.
100%. And while you were talking, it brings up such a cool point about teaching folks regulation, because I think in order for us to have the polyamorous lifestyle that many of us kind of see in our lives, is we have to understand compersion. We have to understand being happy for others in moments of jealousy. And
Yeah,
jealousy accounts for most of domestic violence situations. So, in
yeah,
order for polyamorous lifestyles to happen, we have to understand jealousy, and we're not willing to teach regulation. So I can't imagine that jealousy would be addressed as this is how you handle jealousy in relationships. So I believe there are building blocks for us as a culture that would have to
mm,
be understood and developed in order for polyamory to be widely understood and accepted. And compersion being one of them is really important, and it's hard for me. I think it's hard for most folks. to understand jealousy and feel jealousy in that way. So that just reminded me, I think there's some learning blocks
Yeah.
that must be addressed before.
I think a lot of people listening would sort of say, yes, I really, really seek a deeper connection. I want to be present. I want to be more vulnerable. And I think there are things that people say that they want or think that they want. But I think sometimes conversely, when those things become available, people almost self-sabotage so that something goes wrong, or they're frightened by that being very open. I know, like say it's taken you 7 years to get you to where you are now. I'm sure it could be another sort of 70 years and you'd still be learning and still be developing. How do, yeah, it's a big question. How do we almost stop self-sabotaging our own pleasure? Because that's what you're doing, really. You always think, I want to be this, I want to be there, I want to connect, I want to be vulnerable, I want to open up, and then we do something that just, oh, for goodness sake, you've blown it again. How do we not be scared of closeness when that closeness becomes threatening?
Yeah, well, I am playful about this question, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
best books I've read on this is The Existential Kink, and it is
Mm-hmm.
understanding your kinky side and how it is that you F up your life. And it's to admit to, I'm doing this because I have, what is your deepest core wound? My deepest core wound is I'm not enough and I'm not lovable. So what do? I do everything naughty in my abilities to make that true, right? And so I know that my kinky side is, if this person doesn't find me to be enough in relationship, my kinky side smelt that guy out. And she said, "Oh, I bet that guy doesn't isn't too vulnerable, or maybe he doesn't love connection too much. I like him." So I think that it is so fun and important to understand that you have this kinky side, the self-sabotaging side, this innate desire to prove your deepest wound correct, that goes off in your head, and to befriend that is the best thing that you can do for yourself. Because if you're constantly against it, don't look at a purple elephant, that's all you're going to think. Don't think about a purple elephant, that's all you're going to think
Yes.
about, right? And so I think it's really important to understand that kinky side of us and to say, oh, look what I'm doing on purpose to F up my life in this situation. Am I willing to change it? Maybe not. Maybe in a couple weeks I'm willing to change it. But you are not at the mercy of your brain. You are in charge of your brain. So I think it is really fun and playful to say, oh, what is my kinky side up to? I'm being so bad today by self-sabotaging myself once again. I mean, I do that when I date the wrong guy. I laugh at myself now because it's like, oh, look at you go picking that again. You know, it's okay. We are human, and I think we have these kinky, self-sabotaging, playful sides that are naughty. And I think it's a reframe. Tell Yourself a Better Lie is also another great book, because your universe, what we think about, we bring about. So
Mm.
if you're thinking, not helpful thoughts, that's what your life will formulate to be.
Are you very good at verbalizing what you want?
Now, yes, absolutely. And I have worked so hard at it,
Mm-hmm.
because I did not have a voice. I don't know that my brain necessarily has worked in a way that says, "Oh, these are your needs, Fran. You're hearing them in your brain. Speak." It didn't have that message growing up. So yeah, definitely, it's been a beautiful process, and I feel very grateful every time that I get naked, now that I know how to ask for what it is I want, and I'm not at the mercy of someone else's pleasure. um, I believe Radical Responsibility, the book, I think She Comes First is a wonderful book, but I don't prefer the
Mm.
title as much, because I think we are all responsible for our pleasure, myself included. And I very much learned that through this education and learning, that we are all responsible for our pleasure and to get our needs met.
Do you think you attract a certain kind of person? Because obviously, the way you look, so you're very beautiful, you're very strong, you're very powerful, you're very knowledgeable. Obviously, you're very communicative. Does that almost preclude some men from your orbit?
This is another quiet moment for me. I think it has been interesting who I have attracted. I think we have our role in who we attract and who is in our orbit is how long we
Hmm.
stay with them. You
Okay.
can't always affect who you attract, but I am staying with folks who may not be that helpful for me for less amount of time.
Hmm.
So, certainly I attract folks that are maybe seeking the body side of me, the sexual side of me, and
Yeah.
they see my depth, they see my kindness, they see my empathy. I think they're often surprised at that when they're looking for something maybe different. And then I also take in my role. What is my kinky role in this situation? Why did I attract them? Am I looking at them differently? Am I
Mm.
winking at them in a subconscious way to get them to prove to me that I'm not enough? I mean, I really believe that we manifest our lives. And that's to me, that's I have learned how to change my life based on what I'm up to and why I'm up to it. So I believe that I attract who I attract based on my 70% non-communications that are going on.
Yeah.
And I have to be really honest why I'm in the relationships that I'm in. And I know I'm up to something most of the time.
Yeah. I think that ability to, yeah, to recognize when it's time to exit is incredible strength. I guess is, yeah, better than during your marriage.
Yeah.
So you managed to refine that sort of skill set. But do you, and I'm not trying to negate what you've said, but do you really feel or fear that you're not enough?
Yes. I would say deep down, absolutely. And I am on a constant quest. Maybe it's through my volunteering, maybe it's through affirmations through my work, maybe it's through my muscles at the gym. I probably am always looking for affirmation that I am enough. And each day I work to convince myself that I am and telling myself a better lie, a different lie. I think it's probably really human not to feel enough too. So I don't feel alone so much as I used to. So I get
Yeah.
to listen to a whole bunch of people who don't feel enough. I mean, I truly, Andrew, feel like one of the luckiest people in the world because I am privy to, I could cry. I am privy to the deepest thoughts of people, whether it's in volunteering, whether it's in this space. And I learned so much about life through this work. I feel so eternally grateful.
And the power of that is that that person in that moment has decided for themselves that you are absolutely enough for them, that you're exactly the ears, the brain, the soul, the body they need in that moment. Otherwise, they wouldn't share it with you. So people don't share things like people don't give their deepest, darkest, most painful, most amazing selves to anybody they don't fully commit to in of that moment, and not in a sexual way, just in an emotional way.
Right.
So you must absolutely have that very welcoming, trusting, and you can sense it either through the screen, that aura of I'm here for you without judgment, which is pretty special, really. You've given me a lot of time, so I just want to ask two more quick
You're
questions,
so
if that's okay.
kind. Thank you for
Oh
this
gosh, no. So what one would be, and I really don't know how you're going to answer this, but one would be what you do and how you take on board so much from other people, and how you give so much to other people, and how you embrace different difficult and challenging situations. How do you nurture yourself? How do you yeah, how do you make sure that you show up as a person you want to be each day? Because you must hear, you do hear some trauma. You can't carry trauma with you. It's not healthy for you or the person that's got the trauma. So how do you nurture and protect yourself?
Talking through others, relationship, talking to others,
Mm.
being heard is very important. The gym, jump rope, that is my jam. Every ounce of rage is left in that gym. Today was 2 hours and it's in there. It's at that gym. And also, mental discipline. I truly believe that I cannot get over how lucky I am at the things that I hear every day from people and how much they're struggling. And so to once get in a rut is crazy to me because of the things I've heard um, that people are going through. I just couldn't let that get me down when I am the way that I am, when there are so many struggles. So, yeah, through people and the gym definitely regulates me, and mental discipline, knowing how eternally grateful I am for what I do
Mm.
have.
That's a great answer. And my final question, or I could easily go on for many more hours, but my final question would be: do you have a vision for what the future holds? Do you have a not necessarily ambition, because I'm not sure that's always a helpful word, but do you have a sense of what the future for Fran looks like?
Yes, I certainly would love to be a full-time volunteer in a way. I love to write about the stories of the people that I meet. So, a short story book would be lovely. I meet the coolest people on the planet through volunteering, and I write stories about them every time, and they really move people. So I could see that. I really love advocacy. I would love to advocate for, in my position, cisgendered heterosexual men. I think advocacy for those groups is what I was born to do. I have felt that way since I was little, even when I was beating them on the running track. I still wanted to give them a high five and encourage them. So advocacy of some kind, whether that's speaking it or what. And then my brain, like I said, builds meaning through connection. So
Mm.
talking with people one on one is my specialty, and hearing them and listening. Death and sex, I think, are so interrelated. You can't have one without the other. They're both taboo. They're so intimate. They're both states of transcendence. So getting in those moments of really listening and just those deep moments are so important. So it's a pleasure to be in that space for sure. But I love listening, and the death dueling, I think, I would love to do intimacy at death. So the need to be touched doesn't end. There have been plenty of husbands that I have volunteered with that are still seeking pleasure, desire to be seen when their wives are dying, and they are not monsters for thinking that.
Yeah.
And so death dueling, that is why I got into that, because there are so many older men who are still seeking pleasure and connection later in life. So yeah, long story longer. I think those are the places where I would love to be in. Multiple sources of income.
Mm. I will ask one more question then. Sorry. So I'll be quite old by then, but I'm at your 90th birthday party. You invited me. Thank you very much. And people are giving speeches. What do you hope people will be saying about you?
Legacy is interesting for me. I think I would love to die a very quiet death. I
Okay.
think I wouldn't want many people to know I'm pretty good at an Irish goodbye when you sneak out the back at a party.
Yeah.
I think my legacy can be left in how people felt, and those people will eventually die. So my legacy will die with them as well. So I think nothing. I think nothing and nobody. and the legacy just to live through the experience that we had together. For sure. Thanks for the question.
No, it was a wonderful answer. All your answers have been wonderful. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really think people are going to really enjoy listening to you because you've got a lot of good things to say. So no, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.